Yo, what up, Toshi here. What if I told you Himiko is now going to become one of the best characters in the game? She's going to have a spot in a certain team with a certain character. You see, Himiko for the longest time has never really been a bad character. She's been underplayed and underperforming, but that is only because she hasn't had a spot in any team. But in a new team composition coming up, she is going to be a crucial member of said team. Let me explain. Himiko did receive a couple changes right before the game launched. This is a huge change for Himiko because this can stack multiple times. You can land the follow-up attack, you can land elemental skill, and the ultimate. You can land 4 burns in the same turn. And the tweak they added to her kit makes sense, or is going to make sense after I explain. Himiko is able to do dot damage over time. You see, every single attack Himiko does, whether it's a basic attack, elemental skill, or ultimate, she can have a chance to put the dot onto an enemy. Considering her elemental skill and her ultimate is AoE, you're going to get a lot of value whenever you use her in compositions where you want to focus on targeting multiple enemies at once, which we'll explain later on, while being able to have nice damage and do even more damage to enemies that are already burned, which is going to be the damage over time effect that Himiko provides. Getting crit rate into her ascension is really valuable, because this is a character that also does damage alongside her damage over time. Before we go any further, we gotta explain how damage over time effects work, or DOT for short. Whenever a character puts a damage over time effect onto the enemy, that enemy will take damage whenever they take their turn. This is going to be extremely strong and really valuable, considering, well, every character that puts dots into the enemy, A, does damage, and B, does even more damage passively. That's why damage over time effects are pretty dang strong. But what if I told you they got even stronger because of a certain character coming into the future, and said character is going to make Himiko 10 times better? Let me explain. You see, by just looking at Kafka's light cone, we can deter 2 things about the character. First of all, we know that break effect is going to have some shape or form effect on the character, whether that be she's going to be a character that constantly breaks the enemy's toughness bar, or she's a character that is constantly doing damage in the form of dot with this extra passive. Now, what we also do know is that from the previous CBTs with the character, we know that she is an enabler of damage over time teams. That's why the Sampo dot team is something that is already prevalent and pretty darn strong. Now, what if I told you that Sampo dot team with Kafka will become even stronger with Himiko? Let me explain. Whenever an enemy is inflicted with weakness break, which is essentially breaking the enemy's toughness bar, the white bar above their HP, you will actually get a stack for Himiko, and this charge you get, which you max out at 3, you will be able to do AoE damage, which is considered a follow-up attack, doing nice chunks of damage, but you have a chance to put the dot damage over time on those enemies. This is very valuable because Kafka and Sampo are going to be doing a lot of damage to the enemy and breaking toughness bars constantly. That's why this is going to be very valuable in that team comp, which will make sense a little later when we go over Shampoo. Now, what is also impressive is the fact that since Kafka is AoE and Sampo does AoE damage as well, Himiko also does AoE damage. So whenever you bring those 2 characters, you would also like to bring Himiko because you would effectively get more value with this character in AoE situations. You see, you can use her in a single target fight, and, time will tell how well that team performs with Shampoo and Kafka. But you get tons of more value using her in an AoE setting. Now let's rewind a little bit. You see, Kafka is a very valuable character because she not only does decent AoE damage, she breaks the enemy's shields constantly, and she does nice damage over time effects. Himiko, for the longest time, needed a character to enable her kit, and the part of her kit that inflicts damage over time effects. Also being able to proc the follow-up attack because Kafka will constantly be breaking the enemy's toughness bars, which will in turn give Himiko not only more damage, more follow-up stacks, but also more damage over time effects onto the enemy, which will then in turn trickle on top of each other and you'll have a very powerful team. What makes the dot damage over time team even better? Well, there's a couple things you have to take into consideration. In the previous video, we did go over Silverwolf and we learned 2 things. Damage over time effects deal more damage if the resistance of the enemy is lowered, and damage over time effects do even more damage if the defense of the enemy is also lowered. You see, damage over time does much more damage if the enemy's defense is lower because it doesn't ignore defense. So being able to have Silverwolf allows you to do much more dot damage to a single target. And you could say the same about Pela as well. If you decrease the enemy's defense with Pela, you will also increase the dot damage as well. So what if I told you whenever you're fighting an enemy in single target fights, so maybe you're fighting a boss, you get tons of value using Silverwolf in a dot focused team, because you would effectively have dropped the defense, dropped the resistance of said enemy, and your damage over time effects will do more damage to that enemy. Now in AoE settings, you don't really have to use Silverwolf. You get tons of more value using other characters. But the reason why I brought that up is because of a couple of things. You see, whenever you do damage over time effects, you don't get value from having crit rate or crit damage. Because you cannot crit, and if you can't crit on your dot effects, you don't get any value from having crit damage. So the damage over time team may change the way how Himiko is actually built. You get tons of more value the more attack you have because, well, the damage over time effects does damage based on your attack. I mean, if we just take a look here, we can see that whenever enemies are inflicted with burn, the fire dot will deal damage equal to 30% of Himiko's attack at the start of each turn, which means you get more value by giving her more attack, and you get no value by giving her crit rate and crit damage. That is in a dot-focused team setting. We have to piece this all together with one more puzzle piece. You see Himiko's light cone that you can get from the shop, or the standard banner, or even the limited banner, which I forbid, but if that does happen, you may get more value with this light cone in the damage over time team. Let me explain. You see, whenever the enemy is inflicted with weakness break, the damage dealt by the wearer will increase by 30%. We know a couple more things when it comes to damage over time effects. Other games you're probably familiar with. They also don't do a percentage of the enemy's HP. So you in turn get more value the more attack and the more damage bonuses, damage increases you do have. And since you're getting extra attack, which stacks up to 5 times depending on the amount of enemies on the field, which you probably want to use Kafka in an AoE setting. So that's why if you have this light cone and you use it on Himiko in said dot team, you'll get tons of more value. Probably more value than you'll get using Jing Wan's best in slot light cone. It's crazy I'm saying that. Now we have one more variable in this whole situation. Shampoo. The guy with the best looking hair, he gets tons of value in the dot team. His kit is centered around dots. His kit is also centered around buffing dots. So why does he matter in this whole situation? Well, since he's a 4-star, you'll probably get tons of constellations for the character. And every constellation you get for the character will not only increase the damage for dot effects because you'll have proc the dot more times, you'll get more dots after you defeat an enemy, which is pretty good. You'll get even more stacks of the dot effects. An enemy will take the damage immediately from the dot effects you have on them. And then your damage multiplier will also increase for said wind shear damage over time. So we have to look at a couple of things here. You see, Shampoo does damage to everyone, and he will increase the dot damage that the enemies take by 20%, which will increase the more you level up the ultimate talent, or the ultimate trace, we should say. This is very valuable because it will increase not only Kafka's damage, but also Himiko's damage as well. And as said previously, he will inflict tons of wind shear or damage over time effects from the wind element onto the enemy. So we have to understand how the combat types work in this game. You see, whenever you break the enemy's toughness bar or the shield, you will proc a weakness break effect depending on the element that was used to break said shield. You see, with fire, you will be getting a damage over time or burn effect. Whenever you use lightning, you will also deal damage over time, which is going to be very nice because Kafka will be breaking tons of shields. Shampoo himself will also be breaking shields, so you'll not only get Kafka's lightning, Himiko's fire weakness, but you also get the wind weakness, which is going to be very nice wind shear damage on a character that wants to constantly stack the damage over time effects anyways. So when you piece all of that together, said team is going to be very valuable because not only is it going to be a team that is going to make use of Himiko once and for all, but it's also going to allow you to get more value out of having just attack and multiplicative damage bonuses. You don't really need to worry about crit rate and crit damage because most of your damage will be coming from damage over time. Don't get me wrong, Himiko has very nice AoE damage. That's part of the reason why she has tons of sources of AoE damage. But you don't really need to use her for just farming. You can get tons of value in the Shampoo and Kafka dot team. Now I know what you all might be thinking at this point. Well, Toshi, if you're using 3 damage dealers, what is going to be your defensive option? It's a very good question. You see, you can do one of 2 things. just break their shield. If you constantly break the shield of the enemy, well, they won't be able to attack you. And you see, whenever you have an offensive setup, let's say you use Asta, you'll get tons of more value. Let me explain. Since we learned that damage over time effects get more value the more attack you have, Asta will increase the attack of every single ally, which is going to increase the damage over time effects every teammate does in the team comp. We also know that Asta will increase the fire damage of all allies on the team, which will be very good for Himiko. And we also know that Asta does a damage over time effect for her basic attack, which is going to be very massive, considering maybe you will give her a little bit of effect hit rate, just a tiny bit. And last but not least, you will increase the speed of every single ally. So not only will you have more uptime on your damage over time effects because you would effectively get more turns in the turn order, you'll get more turns in the turn order, try to say that 10 times fast, but you will also get more value because you will effectively be constantly breaking the enemy's toughness bar, which will in turn give more dot effects and more shield break and more uptime on the turn order. And last but not least, if you have the Dance 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 light cone, this is going to be very valuable on your Asta. The reason being is because when you start the battle, you'll want to push up all of your teammates and make sure that you guys can get the turn first. Because if you're trying to break the enemy's toughness bar, you want to make sure you do that right away, or you will be taking damage in this team. And lastly, if you're not someone that likes to live on the edge, which I understand, this is the character for you, the Trailblaze Fire main character, the one we all get for free. The reason why Asta is also good is because you get her for free, literally the first character you get in the beginning of the game. But you see, as a sole defensive option, the Fire main character provides tons of value because of this light cone, and of course it so happens to have the favorite character of Toshi on it. Whenever the Trailblaze main character is attacked by the enemy, she will put, or he, depending on which one you chose of course, will put a dot effect onto said enemy, which is going to be very nice in the damage over time team. You'll get tons of value with this light cone. And last but not least, having a taunt is going to be massive, because that will take away all of the damage that all of your allies could potentially take in the dot team. That's why the Fire main character is pretty good. So there you have it. Himiko is shaping up to be a very good character in the future. Only time will tell the value she provides in said team comp. All you really need to know is, well, you can get this character from the standard banner, the limited banner, which of course I hope that doesn't happen, but maybe you get her in the same 10 pool with Kafka, which will be even better. Or the beginner banner, which I'm sure most of you probably got from there. I stream daily on Twitch, twitch.tv/Toshio, the link will be in the description. We don't know how they're going to shape up when it compares to the Seal Hypercarry team. Maybe the damage over time will become much better than the Seal Hypercarry. And then maybe Himiko will shape up to be one of the best characters, all because she would have finally found her home, which is the Kafka dot team. But we'll see. Thank you for watching and have a nice rest of your day. Peace.